Hi, everyone. Welcome to Waste 360's Nothing Wasted podcast. On every episode, we invite the most interesting people in waste, recycling, and organics to sit down with us and chat candidly about their thoughts, their work, this unique industry, and so much more. So thanks for listening and enjoy this episode. Hi, everyone. This is Liz Bothwell from Waste 360 with Wade Scheel, Director of Regulatory Affairs from Stericycle Environmental Solutions. Welcome, Wade, and thank you for being on the show.
Hi, Liz. Thank you. It's good to be here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Great. So am I. So I know you have a few decades of experience in hazardous waste, but could you share a bit about your background and how you got into this industry?
I sure can, and I like to think of it as my career has matured because I am approaching about 30 years in the industry. I started out of school studying environmental engineering and got a position actually as a solid and hazardous waste manager with a county government in southeastern Wisconsin. And from there, worked about 8 years in that position and then transitioned into the private sector and went into a sales position in the hazardous waste vendor services company. Worked there for a while and then transitioned into another haz waste company, more of a small local regional company that wound up getting acquired by Stericycle back in 2008. And so I've been with Stericycle since then.
Oh, wow. That's great. 30 years. Very admirable.
Yeah, let's just call it admirable.
Perfect. So staying compliant is an enormous responsibility. How do you help employees and customers do that?
Well, I'm in a very exciting and unique position in that I'm with our environmental health and safety team within Stericycle, but I'm actually a customer-facing support position as well as being part of our government and legislative affairs group. So that means two things. One is I watch the regulations to see what's coming and what's being developed and what's being implemented and adopted as far as regulations go that affect their compliance. So we watch those regulations, evaluate and analyze how they're going to affect our customer programs and our services, and then we advise out to our customers on those regulations. And then I'm also in a customer-facing support position, which basically means I get to help them navigate through their compliance challenges. So we help by providing guidance to them. We help navigate any inspection challenges from inspections or issues that have surfaced from regulatory inspections. We help them through developing their programs and making sure that all aspects of their waste management and handling programs internally are compliant with the regulations as well.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's an interesting position to be able to do both. That's fantastic. I've read about the EPA's new management standards for hazardous waste pharmaceuticals rule. Is this driving a lot of what you're focusing on these days?
It is, yes. It's one of the new rules that has been finalized and it will become effective. You said the pharmaceutical rule, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's two aspects to the pharmaceutical rule. There's a whole new subpart of the hazardous waste regulations that have carved out requirement management standards for pharmaceuticals. And then there's also an exemption that was put into place for nicotine-based smoking cessation products. And so those FDA regulated over-the-counter nicotine smoking cessation products are exempted now from being a hazardous waste. And so that primarily affects those retailers and healthcare industry representatives that create pharmaceutical waste. And this new rule was adopted by EPA officially in February and becomes effective in a couple of states, Iowa, Alaska, and Puerto Rico in August. And then states will have to adopt it into their regulations over the next couple of years. But that is very much what we're paying attention to because it's a game changer for how pharmaceuticals must be managed and there's a lot. It's quite a complex rule, so that is definitely where our attention is focused on figuring out what that rule means as far as changes that are necessary for handling and disposing of pharmaceuticals.
And I'm sure this is an ongoing thing. Do you expect more changes? Will this get updated regularly? I'm assuming that's part of what you're working on, watching.
What the rule entails is it sets standards that the EPA has adopted, and then the states can actually go above and beyond if they want to
Okay.
Regulate, take those standards and add to them or revise them as they adopt them into their own state regulations. So it won't necessarily change at the federal level. It is what it is. The rule was adopted and approved by EPA, and so those standards are set. But what can vary is as the states adopt those rules into their regulations, the states can make their own tweaks and adjust and decide to adopt it as it's written at the EPA rule level, or they can make changes when they adopt it into their regulations. So that's what we watch very closely, because we have customers in all of the states, and so we need to be able to know what's different in each state and how our services would change to adjust that, or how our customers' programs would need to change to adjust to fit those.
Sure. And how are you responding to the opioid crisis? Are the drug take-back programs helping?
Yeah, actually, Stericycle is a leader in the arena of offering options and alternatives and programs and services for those individuals that want to collect unwanted medications from the public. And that is a substantial mechanism for fighting the opioid crisis, of having those extra medications. Or Stericycle has led the way, and we are excited about the opportunities that we offer. So, for example, we have two primary offerings in that arena. We have envelopes, seal and send envelopes is what they're branded as, that are offered up to pharmacies or others that are authorized by the DEA to collect unwanted medications, and they can basically hand these envelopes out to the public, and then the public simply fills those envelopes with their medications and mails them back to one of our destruction facilities,
Okay.
Which is an incinerator. And then there is also another mechanism where if pharmacies or hospitals or healthcare clinics that are DEA registrants, they have the opportunity of putting kiosks, which are something similar to a mailbox, a post office mailbox, but they're designed to collect medications from the public. So it's basically a drop box where in the pharmacy, oftentimes they're located in the pharmacy or in a hospital lobby of some kind, the public can bring in their medications and just drop them into these kiosks. And then we collect the material from those kiosks and again send them through to disposal via incineration.
Oh, great. Okay. They do seem to be everywhere now, which is great. It makes it convenient for consumers to take care of it and keep it out of the landfills. So,
absolutely.
Sharps are always top of mind too when discussing hazardous waste. Are you seeing progress in dealing with those as well?
Yeah, there's quite a few what we call extended producer responsibility, or EPR, legislations and regulations coming out. And what those are designed to do is have the collection mechanism set up by those like retailers and healthcare providers to offer up a collection mechanism. But actually the extended producer responsibility part of that equation is that the producers and the manufacturers and the distributors of those either medications or sharps are tasked with, or the funding mechanism is required to be paid for by the manufacturers of that. So the concept is that a ordinance or a statewide program will be adopted that says the producers and the manufacturers of sharps have to set up and pay for a collection program of those. So we're seeing a lot more of those being adopted for both the collection of medications and for sharps. So for example, we're seeing that the state of California right now is going through a program program development phase where the rule has been adopted, the extended producer responsibility rule has been adopted, and they're working through developing the regulations of what that's going to look like. But it's going to require a stewardship program to be designed and implemented to collect both unwanted medications and sharps. So yeah, sharps is definitely starting to become more of a prevalent, I guess, collection of unwanted sharps from the public is becoming more popular.
Okay, makes sense. Is California more progressive?
In all aspects of environmental regulations, they seem to be progressive. They are one of the states that have gone above and beyond the federal regulations and added to and supplemented the federal regulations with additional, more stringent requirements. So absolutely. And as I described with this extended producer responsibility legislation, they're ahead of the game. There's only a couple of states that have even considered or approached or gotten to the point of adopting those. And California is definitely one of the leaders in that arena as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. So how has technology played a role in how hazardous waste is being handled and then communicated, whether it's with customers or consumers?
Yeah, I think we're seeing technology affect our business in a variety of ways. We're going through a process right now of adopting a single platform for running and managing our business. And that is in the works right now. It's being developed, so that will carry us from the start of creating an order to setting up a customer record through to handling the material, tracking the material through to disposal, reporting back out to our customers all the way through to producing the paperwork and the invoicing for the services. So that whole concept of improving our technology and getting onto one platform is in the works right now. So that's definitely one of the aspects of technology that's helping us and that we're moving forward with. The other concept is just the awareness and the connection with customers and the public via social media platforms these days. The technology out there that allows us to communicate with customers and the public is so much more advanced, and there's so many more opportunities to connect directly with the potential users of our programs and services. It's exciting, and this is one mechanism and one aspect of how word is spreading of proper waste handling is through podcasts and conversations just like this.
Sure. And I see you guys have a blog, and customer education seems to be at the forefront of what you're doing. So it's great that you're using technology to get it out there.
Our marketing department has been very good about taking the regulatory information that we've captured and that we've identified and sharing that out to our customers and the public. And that's a great platform, is using the blogs for that.
Oh, that's great. So I read an article that you guest wrote about. It was around body shops and hazardous waste, and things get real awfully fast when you see that the EPA can fine up to $72,000 per day per violation for open containers or any other violations, especially for repeat offenders. How can our listeners stay updated on the latest regulations? Because I know seeing black and white numbers like that can really make you stop and think and want to make sure you're compliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think there's maybe three aspects or three different avenues that the generators or producers out there would be able to stay on top of regulations. One is connecting with a partner, waste services partner like Stericycle, to be able to, keep them updated, provide that necessary information around their programs and services. That's one avenue for them to be connected with a valued partner in that arena. Second is many of the states have their own hazardous waste divisions and programs, and they offer up the ability to sign up for compliance alerts in an email format or a subscription format or a listserv format. So I encourage anyone out there in the regulated community to stay in touch with their statewide regulations by signing up for those listservs and those, the opportunity to get the alerts and announcements directly from the state. And the EPA has the same thing. You can sign up for Federal Register alerts that provide you all of the information on what regulations the EPA is proposing or has adopted. So those are two. And then the third is Yeah, there's subscription services out there, right? Stericycle subscribes to a couple of different industry associations and the subscription services that track and watch and monitor regulations and provide regular feeds out to the regulated community on what's happening. So there's a variety of different mechanisms to stay, really in touch with what regulations are out there that could affect you.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. That's helpful. What other new regulatory changes are on the horizon that we should all be aware of?
Well, I think with hazardous waste specifically, there's a proposed rule that EPA has proposed last year for adding aerosols as a universal waste, and that's expected to become final sometime later this fall in 2019. And that's a significant change because just about everybody produces waste aerosols as part of their waste stream. They're so prevalent these days, and many of those are a hazardous waste because of the propellants or the contents of that aerosol can or canister. So once that rule becomes final, it's going to shift the regulatory requirements for aerosols and put them in the arena of being regulated as a universal waste. And that's pretty exciting because there's very relaxed standards associated with universal waste regulations. So you would not have to count those aerosols towards your hazardous waste generator status any longer, which is always helpful because it can, reduce that amount of hazardous waste that you're generating and therefore could keep you in a lower regulated status of being a very small quantity generator or a small quantity generator. So that's pretty exciting.
Oh, that is exciting. And then can listeners make an impact on upcoming regulations at the state and federal level? Is there anything we can do?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that if you take advantage of those services or methods that I mentioned previously about staying connected with what regulations are being developed and proposed, there's most of the time an opportunity for the public and the regulated community to comment on those regulations. So I would very much encourage that when you're paying attention to what's being proposed is that you look at the opportunity to take that advantage and reviewing those proposed regulations, figuring out how they're going to affect your program, your waste handling program, and then comment on those. Give your feedback to the regulators that are developing those or the legislature that's developing that regulation to make sure that it doesn't complicate your world and it helps, not hurts. So I definitely encourage you to comment on any proposed regulations. It doesn't have to be down in the weeds detailed on the comments that you produce. It can be high level and it can just indicate the positive or negative impacts to your program. Again, it doesn't have to be you don't have to comment just on the negatives. They also welcome the opportunity to know whether or not it's a good regulation for you or for the regulated community.
Oh, great. Okay, that's good to know that our voices can be heard. So retail seems to be an area of focus for you in Stericycle. Could you tell us a little bit about the Retail Environmental Compliance Committee?
Yeah, absolutely. The retail sector as a hazardous waste producer has what I would say kind of flown under the radar since about 10 years ago. And these, environmental hazardous waste regulations have been in place for well over 30 years now. So, recently retail has been scrutinized and inspected pretty heavily for their hazardous waste compliance. And as such, there's an organization that represents Retail Industry Leaders Association, or RILA, that has developed a website of resources for retailers in particular to be able to provide guidance and advice and an overview of state regulations as they affect retailers. So it's been a very useful resource, and it's where we direct many of our retail customers to for that advice and guidance to manage their programs.
Oh, great. Okay. And then for household hazardous waste, what role do the municipalities play in the disposal. Are you seeing improvements here, or is it more being done on the private side?
Yeah, household hazardous waste, actually, that's where I started my career, is working for a county government. And that's one of the programs that we established, is the collection of household hazardous waste from our communities. And the challenge with that is that they're expensive. Those programs are expensive, and their effectiveness is based upon convenience. And so the concept of collecting as much household hazardous waste as you can really depends upon whether or not there's convenient options for your residents to be able to drop off that material or to bring that material in for collection. So the combination of collection events and permanent collection sites or temporary collection sites is often necessary to spread that convenience factor across your population. I see household hazardous waste programs continuing to be very popular. I see them continuing to be funded at the state and local level. And of course, the private sector is involved from either managing or staffing those collection events and sites, or simply being the disposal outlet for the material that's collected. So there's definitely the private-public partnership required as part of that model of collecting the household hazardous waste. But I do see them still being very popular. I still do see them as what I would consider necessary and effective at, reducing the potential of pollution, simply because, I've worked with many of these household hazardous waste programs as well as agricultural chemical collection programs, and
Sure.
I've seen how much people just hold on to this material, and when it's time for it to be thrown away, these household hazardous waste collection programs are so much more effective at capturing the hazard from those materials as just simply putting them in the landfill. So I'm a big advocate and proponent of household hazardous waste programs.
Oh, good. Excellent. I'm jumping back to medical waste now, and this was a little while ago, but I know it's always a big issue. What did the Ebola epidemic teach you?
Well, it taught us a couple of things. It taught us that we need to do much more pre-prep work at setting up protocols and policies for handling those types of waste, setting up the transportation and disposal mechanisms and approvals, so that if there's the need to have that type of highly contagious waste, we have the systems and the protocols and the practices ready to go and the approvals ready to go to be able to manage it. So that was definitely a learning tool for when this situation presented itself previously. Second thing is just that concept of protecting everyone. Our health and safety team had to jump in to develop the protocols that our own technicians and our own drivers would be needing to employ to ensure that they were thoroughly protected from any risk of exposure. So that whole concept of helping our customers understand what was required, being able to offer a service was challenging, and then, protecting and ensuring that we were watching out for our own employees and drivers' health and safety was also a big learning factor. I think that we're very much set and advanced in the preparation aspect of this, because we know that there's other risks out there that have presented themselves from the potential from coming into the States. But it was definitely a learning curve, because even the agencies that regulate the CDCs and the state level infectious waste programs really didn't have in place the necessary protocols or requirements, or they hadn't even considered all of the challenges that type of a situation or type of waste would present. So it was a learning curve for all of us.
Oh, it seemed that way. Oh, good. But it sounds like be ready for whatever is next, which is great. And Stericycle has moved from what seemed to be primarily a healthcare medical waste focus and now even shredding documents for safety of information. How is that transition going in terms of holistically looking after corporations in all areas of waste, including information and safety on the confidentiality side?
Yeah, absolutely. With Stericycle's acquisition of Shred-it, we are a leader in the secure document destruction business. And it has really presented an opportunity for us to work with our customers on a holistic approach, as you described it, for managing various waste streams within the setting. Primarily, we've looked at incorporating those services into those customers that we already service from a healthcare waste standpoint, from the medical and infectious waste and sharps and hazardous waste and recycling. And now we have the opportunity of working with them on document destruction. So it's definitely an opportunity, and it's definitely going well as far as that integration of being able to consolidate service offerings across the board into all customers. So now we have the opportunity of managing, a variety, the mixture of wastes across a healthcare setting. So from a hospital system to a manufacturer to commercial business, we have the ability to manage confidential records, the hazardous waste, non-hazardous waste, universal waste, and so forth.
Oh, that's great. And then Stericycle also seems to take corporate social responsibility pretty seriously. You seem to be doing good, not just trying to look good. So what strides are you all making in that regard as well?
Yeah, we're excited to, we have now within the organization a Senior Vice President of Environmental Health and Safety that manages our environmental health and safety programs on a global basis. And it was just recently announced that we're going to be ramping up our sustainability focus. We already have had a strong sustainability approach to our business with the concept of recycling cardboard from all of the waste operations that we manage, as well as reusable sharps containers that we've had implemented for years. Instead of single-use disposable sharps containers, we have a process and a system in place where we're reusing sharps containers. And the recent activity is looking globally at producing a more systematic and functional approach to sustainability. So we're reviewing all of our practices and internal operations to see where we can make improvements from a sustainability setting, either energy improvements or minimization of waste. And that's exciting changes within the organization. So there's a commitment to focus on that in 2019, latter half of 2019 and 2020 and beyond. So we're very much looking forward to that within the environmental health and safety organization, as well as the other aspects of our organization and the functions within the company as well.
Oh, that's great. So what else should we be paying attention to around hazardous waste, medical waste, and recycling overall?
Well, I think that we need to communicate out to everyone listening is that hazardous waste regulations have been in place for a long time. There's still a lot of activity from regulatory agencies at the state and the EPA level, from inspections and violations and penalties. So this is a very serious arena from the standpoint that it can lead to substantial penalties for non-compliance with regulations. And the concept of having a solid program in place and having business buy-in to making sure that program is effective and implemented across your platform of business is very important. It can lead to, like I said, substantial penalties, but then that also becomes a brand image aspect as well. I work directly with many of our retail customers, and as you can see in some of the public information releases and alerts, retailers have been fined substantial penalties for non-compliance across all aspects of waste management, but particularly hazardous waste management. So that's where my focus and arena is in the hazardous waste regulations. And I would say that it's still out there, and it's still very important for you to have a successful and effective program for managing hazardous waste in place.
And you bring up a good point about the perspective of your brand and how people view it. It goes beyond the fines. It could actually affect your business for years to come, even beyond that. So it's very important to make sure you're compliant.
It is, and to go back to the social media aspect of our business, and that can be a positive thing, but it certainly can be a negative aspect of the concept that there's a lot of folks watching these days what companies do good and what companies do bad, and they get their information from social media, and social media tends to pick up on the negatives and broadcast and publish those pretty rapidly and pretty effectively. So the concept of being penalized pretty substantially for environmental harm is a really quick black eye that can surface and be broadcast pretty quickly with social media these days. So we definitely work with our customers and present that to our customers is another reason why it's important to have a program in place, and it's important to spend that money to do things right for waste management and disposal.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And then you've been fortunate enough to be in this industry, like you said, for 3 decades. So you're in a prime position to give advice to young professionals entering this industry. What would you say to them about the industry and moving forward in it?
Well, I would say that there is a lot of opportunity for innovation in our industry, and the exciting, encouraging things that I'm seeing from the younger generations than me is not looking at things the way that we have always looked at them. Environmental regulations don't tend to be sexy, and they don't tend to attract the high level focus or attention or interest as, IT concepts and the Silicon Valley type ideas, crowdfunding and so forth. The whole concept of innovation, and we're ripe for that right now, because the technologies that are used to destroy waste and to manage waste, I think there's a lot of opportunity there for us to look at innovative ways of handling, transporting, packaging materials that ultimately need to get disposed of. And so those traditional disposal mechanisms or methods of incineration or in recycling for, pulping the paper and getting that back into the mix. All of those aspects that I just mentioned are ripe for innovation. And that's where, just a refreshing, different perspective from younger generations is the opportunity. That's where I really see the opportunity. And then incorporating, like you said before, new technology into how we do what we do. Huge opportunity there for us to use technology to our advantage.
Definitely. And like you said, it's an exciting time to get into the industry. So, and you can have a career out of it. So it's fantastic. So what keeps you busy outside of work?
Well, I do enjoy the outdoors when I can. That's primarily in the summer. So I like to go out and fish and do some boating. I try to be active when we can. So do a little bit of outdoor exercise and activity too, but it's just a good place to be in the summer. And then I try to migrate south in the winter because it's a little bit cold up here and snowy.
Smart man. So how can listeners hear more from you and Stericycle?
I would encourage them to continue to stay connected to us via our website, Stericycle.com, where we have blog information and a lot of information that's updated regularly on the approach of our company and the activities in our organization and our company. So I'd encourage everyone to follow us on Stericycle.com.
Well, thank you so much. This has been so informative, Wade. We really appreciate your time, and this has been a great conversation. Our listeners are going to learn a ton. So thank you.
Great. Thank you for having me. It's been enjoyable. I appreciate it.
Okay. Have a great day, Wade.
Thanks, you too.